Okay, for this next video on learning how to use skin tones, we are going to be using crayons. Crayons often get a bad rap because they're seen as things that just kids use. However, they can actually be used very effectively for more mature work. If you treat them a little bit like a pencil crayon in the sense that you draw with them lightly. Alright, so I'm going to start by just placing down a base color on each of the three characters. If you remember from the other videos, we're using the characters of Rey, Poe, and Finn from Star Wars. Since I'm reusing this drawing repeatedly for different materials, I've just been tracing in between by using carbon paper, hence the bit of smudging that happens from the carbon paper. So I've laid down the color of apricot to do the base of Rey's skin tone, and now I'm using a little bit of melon to add in some pink in some areas. For example, the pink that naturally shows up on most people's ears, make a little bit rosier along her cheeks, a bit on her nose, and a couple other key areas that are just a little of pink in this image of the three of these characters in the desert. And once again, I'm not going very hard with these right now. I'm starting lightly and I'm building these layers up. Okay, it's really important that you build your layers up of color so that you slowly get to the color you want, because these are wax crayons. They can go over top of each other to an extent, but eventually it'll get too thick and the colors won't quite go over top of each other. So you want to find your colors a little bit more slowly, a little bit more naturally, and that's going to help you achieve the effects you want to get. And with these videos, I'm only focusing on the skin tone, so I'm avoiding the hair and the features of the mouths and the eyes and so forth. I'm just applying the skin tones just to get a rough look of what you need to do to achieve skin tones. Now there's a bit of orange in her skin, probably from the sun, so I'm using this color called macaroni and cheese to place down some of that orange. You gotta love names on colors with Crayola brand crayons. Sometimes I wish other art material companies would steal these names because they're just a lot more fun. Okay, so at this point I've basically finished doing Rey's skin tone. I might add in a couple of colors here and there, but I'm going to move on to Finn's skin tone. Now with Rey I started with peach, I think, but I think I'm going to, no, I started with apricot for Rey's skin tone, but I think I'm going to jump straight to tan for Poe's skin tone. Since the actor who plays Poe is partially Puerto Rican and something else, which I just cannot remember at this minute, his skin tone is a bit darker. This actor, Oscar Isaac, often gets cast in roles of people who are Hispanic or Southern Mediterranean or Middle Eastern. He kind of has one of those skin tones that fits into a lot of the various others. Blocking in some of the main areas with this color, and then I'm going to go in with other colors and define it a little bit more specifically. And some of that melon again for the pinks that show up on the cheekbone. This burnt orange is a nice darker toned orange, will work better on his skin tone. To bring in some of those orange highlights that have happened because they're all a little bit tan from working in the desert. Bring a bit of raw sienna in as we start to do some of the darker areas, including the 5 o'clock shadow on his chin. Also helps along the hairline. and in the bags around his eyes. You can see that now that the wax is getting thicker, I have to press a little bit harder to define some areas. And now I'm going to work on bringing the darker values in under his chin. I kind of want to bring out the highlight on his cheek a little bit more, so I'm going to come back to this apricot that I used for raised skin and just bring out that highlight. Same along the edge of his nose. Asparagus, let's see what that looks like versus forest. Oh yeah, asparagus is definitely close to what I'm looking for. But here's a nice olive. Yep, that's what I'm looking. It's got a bit of that olive skin tone, which I also share. So I want to start to bring that into his skin tone and cut some of the pink out a little bit. Just have that contrast. I'm just doing a light layer of it across the entirety of the image. And maybe just a little bit darker here in the shadows where the light picks it up. Just the curve of his jawline. Okay, so that basically finishes his. All right, and now I'm gonna move on to doing the skin tone for Finn. So with Finn, I'm actually gonna start just a little bit darker. I think I'm gonna start with this raw sienna because it's gonna allow me to pop up the highlights. Now you might be able to tell the proportions aren't quite perfect on the drawing of Finn. The paper shifted as I was tracing from my original drawing into this one, so you can see that his head's slightly cut off, and that kind of shortens the whole image. So this might look a little bit cramped. Start to bring in some of those other tones, using a bit of mahogany on this red area on his jawline, and up here along his temple. And it comes out just a little bit in his cheekbone, but really in his cheekbone, you get some sort of purpley pink. So there we go, there's a good color for it. Since his blush is highlighted a little bit different on his skin tone, the way the light picks it up. It doesn't pick up as yellow as it does elsewhere. And here you kind of get a hint of purple. You can see I keep testing the crayon colors down here just to be sure. Since I don't work with them overly often, and mostly just for coloring with my son, I need to be sure that the color is the color I actually intended to be. You'll notice I'm using mostly hatching lines and cross-hatching lines, which allows me to have the colors layer over top of one another and create new colors, as well as not to fill the surface in too solidly until I need to, so that I can slowly build up the color to get to the most accurate skin tone possible. And I'm going to use a little bit of white to get the highlight on his forehead and the edge of his nose. See, by using one color on top of the other, it smudges and creates the color I'm looking for. So it's not actually coming out white, but it's taking those browns that I have underneath and just making them look a little bit creamier, which helps me create the highlight that I need. I'm going to use a little bit of black just to further define a couple of spots to make them the most accurate that I need them to be.